You want brutal honesty? Here it is. The Cowboys didn't just lose a game, they surrendered a season-sized lifeline. One loss on a night where Detroit played like a team with something to prove, and suddenly Dallas's faint postseason dream looks smaller than the TV timeout heater that just ended. Let's rewind. This was supposed to be the week Dallas flipped the script. They'd clawed back into conversation recently, and the matchup felt winnable. A compressed path to relevance in a division that's anything but settled. Instead, the Lions showed a version of themselves that looks playoff ready. Explosive on offense, opportunistic on defense, and willing to answer every Cowboys push with a bigger shove. Jahmyr Gibbs, 3 touchdowns. David Montgomery, a 35-yard breakaway. Detroit's playmakers made plays when they needed to. The Cowboys, meanwhile, were habitually a half step late, settling for field goals where touchdowns belonged, coughing up a tipped interception at the worst possible moment, and allowing a special team swing that turned a comeback window into a coffin nail. Now the math is ugly. The Cowboys' playoff odds cratered. Single digits, according to the simulators. That's not a number you massage with adjectives. It's a map back to the offseason. You can survive one bad night. You can even survive a stretch of bad nights if there's an identity under them. But this loss wasn't an aberration. It was a symptom. A team that still hasn't learned how to close the door when it matters. What went wrong is obvious when you watch the film. First, the starts. Detroit punched early, and when the Cowboys tried to answer, they didn't get the return punches. Settling for 3 field goals in the first half instead of cashing in on drives creates 2 problems. You bleed clock, and you leave your opponent a scoring margin they can manage. The Lions took advantage, not only with their ground game, but with sudden strikes in the passing game. And when your opponent gets chunks, you suddenly face a binary choice. Take risks to catch up, or stay conservative and hope a lucky sequence appears. The Cowboys tried a little of both and ended up with neither. Second, turnovers. The interception off George Pickens' tipped pass was a momentum killer. That moment turned a manageable halftime deficit into a multi-score problem in the blink of an eye. You can have yards, you can have time of possession, you can have elegant play designs, but turnovers are the currency that purchases wins. The Lions converted that mistake into a touchdown with the sort of efficiency good teams show in clutch moments. Third, defensive collapse at the wrong time. After a valiant comeback to pull within 3 points, Dallas surrendered a rapid-fire response. A big kickoff return, a 29-yard Jameson Williams catch, a roughing the passer penalty. Suddenly, Detroit is in scoring position and the Cowboys are scrambling for answers. That sequence doesn't happen by accident. It's the product of a defense that stops playing assignment football under pressure and an offense that hasn't sustained drives long enough to give the defense a breather. Now, a little color on the bright spots that won't mask the hurt. Brandon Aubrey's 63-yard field goal was a thing of beauty, a moment that kept Dallas in the fight and reminded you that even on a bad night, there are craftsmen doing their jobs. Ryan Flournoy's 42-yard touchdown? A busted coverage delivered it, and the Cowboys took it with the hunger of a team trying to breathe. Those plays are proof the Cowboys can still make noise. But takeaways and defensive stops are price of admission items late in the season, and Dallas didn't collect enough of them. Let's talk roster and continuity, because it's easy to point fingers at one bad game and miss the structural problem. The Cowboys aren't a team being undone by bad luck alone. There's a deeper issue. They've had to play with a roster missing key rhythms and continuity. Injuries, a patchwork offensive line, and a secondary that has been inconsistent have compounded through the year. When a roster is that thin on chemistry, every opponent's momentum swing becomes a bigger swing against you. The Lions exploited that, and they made the Cowboys pay the full toll. From a coaching perspective, this is the kind of loss where decisions are magnified. Play calling in the red zone, fourth down philosophy, personnel groupings on defense in obvious passing situations. Coaches get graded on how they respond to adversity in these moments, and the Cowboys' reactions felt reactive instead of proactive. They played catch-up in a way that invited mistakes, then suffered the classic double penalty, mental fatigue and errant execution. So what now? Realism is the currency of playoffs talk. The Cowboys' path now is narrow and brutal. win out, and get extremely lucky with tiebreakers. That's not impossible, but it's not probable either. They can choose the posture that makes a miracle more likely, steel themselves, focus on fundamentals, protect the football, tighten up the red zone, but every opponent ahead smells desperation and will call the Cowboys bluff. The margin for error has evaporated. If you're a Cowboys fan, you felt this before. The roller coaster of hope, rebuilding into contention, and then watching the train slip the tracks because of one stupid sequence. It's an old sports lesson. The strongest teams don't just have talent, they have a spine. They win ugly. They avoid gifting opponents opportunities. They refuse to let a single sequence decide their fate. Dallas didn't show that spine Thursday night. And yet there is a sliver of practical optimism. This team still has elite pieces. A quarterback who can drive comebacks, playmakers who create after the catch, a defense that in flashes can pressure and force turnovers. Fix the fundamentals, protect Dak, shore up the line, clean up the coverage misses, and you get a team that can at least force those simulations to be kinder. But fix is the operant verb. It's not a soundbite. It's a week-by-week, practice-by-practice process that this roster needs immediately. The Lions, for their part, are dangerous. Jahmyr Gibbs' performance was a statement. He's not a role player in Detroit's offense. He's a closer. They balanced a backfield that can punish you up the middle and make explosive plays in the secondary. That kind of palette makes them hard to game plan for because you must defend both the methodical and the spontaneous. Detroit isn't built for one-off moments. They're built to punish you when you waver, and Thursday night was their proof of concept. Closing thought, this is a season-defining moment, not necessarily a season ender. It feels heavier because the math turned against Dallas in one painful night. But sports are cyclical. Teams recover from worse. The question is whether this Cowboys team has the discipline to recover and the humility to rebuild the small competencies that win late-season games. Right now, the scoreboard shows a bad result. The real test is in the next locker room meeting. Will there be excuses or accountability? Will there be schematic stubbornness or adaptive change? If I had to leave you with one image from this game, it's simple. Jahmyr Gibbs crossing the goal line while a Cowboys bench looks down, not in defeat, but in the recognition that the season is now asking for more than hope. It's asking for hard decisions, controlled execution, and a collective refusal to let one more opponent write the final line in your story. Lights out for Dallas, at least for now. The Cowboys crawled back into playoff conversation this season, then handed the keys back to fate in Detroit. A 44-30 loss that wasn't just a bad night, it was a seismic hit to their postseason hopes. Jahmyr Gibbs turned into the dagger, ripping off 3 touchdowns and turning the Lions' urgency into a statement win. This game was a perfect microcosm of Dallas's season. Flashes of brilliance, long stretches of avoidable mistake, and one inability to close when it mattered. The Cowboys fell into an early hole, settling for field goals while Detroit punched in touchdowns. By the second quarter, mistakes started multiplying. A tipped pass intended for George Pickens bounced into Derek Barnes' hands, and the Lions cashed it in for a swift touchdown. Suddenly, it was 27-9, and the script tilted toward Detroit. Dallas did what they've done all year: scrap, claw, and mount a comeback. Big kicks from Brandon Aubrey, yes, including a 63-yarder, and a busted coverage touchdown that made it 30-27 rekindled hope. But hope needs sustenance, and the Lions answered with a lightning-fast drive capped by Gibbs' third score with 2:19 left. That sequence crushed Dallas momentum in under 3 minutes. There's a deeper problem here than one rough Thursday. This team's margin for error evaporated back when they sat 3-5-1, and now they're living like every play is a referendum. You can't afford those early turnovers. You can't give a dangerous back like Gibbs the kind of space he exploited. And you can't let an improved run defense spiral back into its early season identity at the wrong time. Credit Detroit. When they needed to show they could be dangerous,